Howdy friendos, and welcome to part 2 of our look into Breaking Bad. If you haven't seen our Jesse Pinkman video, you might want to go ahead and check it out after this. We are dropping 4 Breaking Bad videos this month, and each of them are very lengthy and feature a lot of interesting characters. However, today we are checking out Gus Fring, a character who, despite having loads of on-screen time in both Breaking Bad and its spin-off series Better Call Saul, we actually know very little about. Much of his backstory is only talked about, and very little of it is actually seen. Gus Fring is a Chilean-American who migrated to Mexico in 1986 after partnering with German businessman Peter Schuler for some unknown excursion. Fans theorize that he is a former general and possibly a war criminal due to some dialogue spoken by various cartel members. Once he moved to Mexico, he met the love of his life, Max Arciniega, where they produced a high-class strain of methamphetamine while also forming a restaurant called Los Pollos Hermanos, aka the Chicken Brothers. The two attempted to form an alliance with the cartel, however Max was executed due to a mistake in their approach. In the early 90s, Gus emigrated to the United States and expanded his restaurant business there. During that time, he came under the umbrella of the international fast food conglomerate and became a meth distributor for the cartel. Our analysis begins during the middle of the spin-off series Better Call Saul, where Gus is already a major part of the drug cartel distributing cocaine and methamphetamine for them in the New Mexico area. Gus Fring is a proper businessman, able to meticulously manage both a legitimate and illegitimate business flawlessly. He is polite and kind to his employees, both legitimate and not, and is considered a genius by every character in the show. However, bubbling under the surface is a rage and drive for revenge. Gustavo is furious about having Max stolen from him by the cartel and has plans to betray and kill them all that he will enact slowly and patiently throughout the series. What's funny is that this question has actually been asked and answered personally by Gus Fring's actor, Giancarlo Esposito. He claims that Gus Fring is neutral evil, which is very interesting, but you know what? Let's actually go with it. Let's go with Mr. Esposito, or whoever wrote this video. I seriously doubt that Giancarlo himself wrote it. Also, I'm pretty sure I'm saying that name wrong. I've heard him say it a few times and I can't quite get it. I'm going to take him at his word that Gus Fring will start off at neutral evil, but let's just see where he ends up, because honestly, I'm kind of curious to see if that's a good take. I have a lot of thoughts on Gus. He is a fantastic villain. In fact, all the other characters from Breaking Bad are excellent as well. And if you want to make sure that you don't miss the release of those videos, be sure to carry on the tradition of Los Pollos Hermanos by clicking the subscribe button. And be sure to slow cook the like button and let your family know that our new curly fries are in the comment section down below. But with that out of the way, let's go.
Sir, if you have a complaint, I suggest you submit it through our email system. I would be happy to refer you to our website.
The first thing we see Gus do in the series is during Better Call Saul, when he interferes with Mike killing Hector Salamanca. We later learn that this is not because he wants to keep the peace, but because he wants Hector to suffer at his own hands. Weirdly enough, even though he is saving a life, this is chaotic evil.
Do not wish to see your gun. And if I don't, I promise you won't see mine.
Later, when meeting with Mike, who discovered Gus was tailing him, he asked Mike not to kill or damage the Salamancas. When he learned that Mike wasn't done with him, however, Gus set up an elaborate trap to plant drugs on the Salamanca shippers and destroy Hector's business. Lawful evil.
I understand that your supply line has been compromised. And this is most unfortunate. However, my trucks are already at maximum capacity.
Make room.
Hey folks, Future Stuart here. Forgot to mention that due to Hector's business being busted, Gus is forced to manage his part of the shipping. Lawful neutral.
Tell him we're square.
What? No.
Later, when Mike refused to accept payment for screwing over Hector, Gus asks why. Mike simply states that he did it for his own reasons and refuses to be paid. Later, when Mike asks Gus to launder him his own money, Gus hires Mike as a security consultant and told him that he'd be willing to make sure Mike got his money free of charge and taxes, stating that he wouldn't deny Mike's family his money. Lawful good, actually.
I know what you've done. The Salamancas, they do not. Do you understand what I'm saying?
In Season 4 of Better Call Saul, a Salamanca manager by the name of Nacho is replacing Hector's heart medication with sugar pills. This eventually results in a stroke that paralyzes him. Once Gus realizes this, he got furious, thinking that his kill could have been stolen from him. He forces Nacho to work for him and threatens his family to do it. Neutral evil.
Are mine. It's impossible.
dangerous, difficult, and very, very expensive. Not quite impossible.
Throughout the course of Season 5, Gus starts building his meth super lab. To do this, he hires a team of German engineers. He sets up facilities for them and compensates them very generously. I'd say this is fairly lawful neutral as far as gang business goes. During that time, he also partially is taking care of Hector. He is taking charge of the hospital visits and the leading doctors. He doesn't do this for any other sake than to make sure that Hector stays alive and that he's in as much misery as possible. When he realizes that Hector is trapped within his own paralyzed body, he dismisses his doctor, even though she thinks he might make a full recovery. Chaotic evil.
I'll take care of it.
Are you sure?
As the production of the Super Lab continues, his lead engineer gets homesick and escapes one weekend to be with his wife. During the attempt, the engineer leaks valuable information to the Salamancas and needed to be put down. He orders Mike to do the execution. Lawful evil.
And of course, she has been compensated.
He does make sure the engineer's wife is compensated for his death and makes sure the rest of them were paid before dismissing them. Lawful neutral.
Lalo Salamanca. I need to know where he is going.
During that time, the new Salamanca in town, Lalo, is doing things to ruin Gus's business. Gus takes the blow and bides his time. The moves involve in several arrests of low-level dealers, and Gus even looks for new dealers to set up as patsies. Lawful evil.
I am the doctor's friend, nothing more.
They have no idea you financed the whole place.
I prefer it that way.
Later, when Mike gets injured, Gus has him cared for in a pueblo he owns. He also explains his revenge motivations to Mike. Lawful good.
He's got a gun to my father's head.
During this time, Gus refuses to allow Nacho to leave, even though he has kinda earned his way out. He eventually realizes that Nacho has to be an unwitting suicide pawn in Gus's plan for revenge. Lawful evil. Part of this is learning Nacho will need to destroy his flagship restaurant. Gus helps him out in order to protect himself and his business associates. I love this sequence too. Nacho is just going in and working fast and loose, but Gus is just being so goddamn extra about it. Like, he's moving all smooth and robotic, like he knows he's being watched by an audience. It's just really, really funny to me, but lawful neutral on Nat 20 scene.
Nacho Varga. I think it's time we cut him loose.
I see no reason to give up an asset.
Then, when Nacho asked to leave again, Gus refused to let him go and sent him south to assure Lalo Salamanca was dead and leaves him to take the fall. Lawful evil. Sending a hit squad to kill Lalo and innocent Salamancas is definitely neutral evil. Realizing that Nacho is most likely going to be caught, tortured, and extracted info about Gus, and then die, Gus sends assassins after him. Realizing that Nacho has no reason to listen to him, Gus is willing to use his dad as leverage. Even though Gus was eventually persuaded by Mike and Nacho himself not to do it, the fact that this was even on the table is neutral evil. Nacho calls him and offers to be sacrificed himself to assure the fact that his dad will be taken care of. Gus has Nacho take the fall. Lawful neutral. Over the next several days, Gus realizes that Lalo is still alive and looking to kill him. Paranoid, he establishes a crazy surveillance on himself and takes several contingencies and redundancies with predictive levels to match Detective L himself. Gus sets up body doubles, wears body armor, and hides a gun in his super lab in order to prepare for Lalo's return. Chaotic neutral.
Need to figure out what they're trying to... Starts figuring out their little scheme and suddenly this? No, it's...
And what's funny is that he's totally right. Through a long series of events, Gus managed to learn that Lalo is after his lab. Gus was forced to head into the basement, and thanks to his predictions, he was able to run and get away from the Salamanca warrior in a really, really intense climax. Since his reaction to Lalo is purely self-defense, this action is true neutral and just a Nat 20 scene. We'll give it to him.
Seguirá siendo de los Salamanca. Y el resto del norte será tuyo.
He then makes peace with the cartel and continues to be their distributor in the north. Lawful neutral. This includes having to skip a dinner with a potential love interest too. Chaotic neutral. For the next 5 years, Gustavo Fring aggressively expands his drug empire. During that time, it is assumed that Gustavo reigns with a fair but nevertheless iron fist. During that time as well, it's implied that his territory and gangs do not have hard rules against using children or preying on addicts. No matter what it comes down to, when you manage a business this big and this violent, there's no other way to rule it other than lawful evil. 5 times, 1 for each year.
I would like to know why you wouldn't meet with me yesterday.
Once Walter White enters the scene and starts to sell his meth, Gus is approached by Mike to see if he wants to buy any. Gus sets up a meeting, but after realizing Jesse was high, Gus ignores them. Walt attempts to make contact again, and Walt simply wants to unload his current product. Gus offers him the opportunity to deliver what he has for a cool $1.2 million. During the season, he also realizes that Walt has lung cancer, but gets confirmed by Hank during a trip to the DEA office. Lawful neutral.
Do the deal.
Although there are a lot of individual actions for Season 3, it can be summarized fairly quickly with a few sentences. Overall, Season 3 has Gus wanting Walt to cook a bunch of high-quality meth for him, but Walt wants out. To lure Walt to him, he saves him from the Salamancas, hires Jesse to piss him off, and shows Walt his super lab. Lawful neutral.
Hank Schrader.
The Salamancas, however, are impatient, and they want their vengeance for the death of Tuco, who happened to die in an earlier season. To get rid of this threat, Gus encourages them to go after Hank Schrader, the agent who technically killed him. Gus then warns Hank in an anonymous call, which gives him the edge to defend himself. Since Gus is manipulating 2 different parties to kill each other, this is lawful evil. When Lionel survives, Gus arranges assassins to kill both him and his boss, Bolsa. Neutral evil.
What advice do you have for me?
Never make the same mistake twice.
After eliminating many of his enemies, Gus invites Walt to dinner and encourages Jesse and the other dealers to make peace. Now that his enemies are gone, Gus is mostly trying to keep a clean house. During this time, he is fairly reasonable and sympathetic to Jesse's distaste to using children and orders his goons to stop using them, which unfortunately results in their death. I'd like to think Gus genuinely finds using children distasteful, and this was a good attempt at a moral compromise. Lawful good, although I understand if you don't see it that way.
Explain yourself.
Unfortunately, his goons killed the kid Jesse was trying to protect, which caused Jesse to become infuriated and to try to take them out. Walter, not wanting to see Jesse get caught up in gang violence, takes matters into his own hands and executes the child killers himself, in what is still a Nat 20 scene, by the way.
Run.
This infuriates Gus, who is currently at Walt's mercy since he is the genius behind their cook. Jesse is excommunicated and Gale is reinstated as Walter's assistant. However, Gus fully intends to replace him once Gale masters his recipe. Lawful evil.
They've got me at the laundry and they're going to kill me.
Jesse, do it now! Do it!
Which is exactly what happens one night. Walt is lured into the lab under Gus's orders. Unfortunately, Walter gets a distress signal out to Jesse, who executes Gale. Lawful evil.
When the humidity rises and your product goes cloudy.
The next morning, Gus arrives to intimidate Jesse and Walt, only to realize that Victor had continued the current batch without approval and made several mistakes when looking into Gale's death. He murders Victor in front of Walt, Jesse, and Mike to not only send them a message, but to punish Victor in an extremely cruel method. Chaotic evil.
Just like you wanted. The kid's a hero.
Now that he's reliant on Jesse and Walt, 2 wild cards for his cook, he realizes he needs to figure out a new angle to keep them under control. He figures that Jesse needs direction and sets up an elaborate plan to make Jesse think that he's a hero and that he's valuable to their organization. This is 100% gaslighting to get Jesse on his side and totally lawful evil.
I'm good. Sure. Take a Diet Coke. Thank you very much.
Of course.
Season 4 has Gus handling 2 different problems. The first one is Hank suspecting Gus of being a drug lord. Walter begs Gus to let him handle it, which he obliges. Gus then attends a meeting with the DEA to clear his name. It almost works too. Lawful neutral. The second thing he's dealing with is the cartel. They realize that Gus now has a super lab and no longer requires their services to bring drugs across the border. He offers to pay them off and they refuse. They use several methods to intimidate him and he eventually agrees to their demands to hand over the keys to the operations to them. Neutral evil.
I promise you this. Either we're all going home and none of us are.
This, of course, is a lie as he recruits Jesse and Mike into the scheme to get close to the cartel's leaders. He takes them south to Mexico and shows them Walt's recipes. He told the cartel that he is willing to give them Jesse, and fails to tell Jesse this part of the plan. And during the celebration with Don Eliado and his captains, he poisons them all with tequila. In a Nat 20 scene, Gus wipes out Don Eladio and all of his enemies while managing to survive his own poison, neutral evil, and just a Nat 20 scene. I love his speech.
Let Mr. White go. Don't kill him.
You know that won't work.
Then you've got a problem.
As he is leaving Mexico, he tells Jesse that he wants him to take over the meth cook. Jesse is more than willing to accept, but refuses to allow Mr. White to die. Gus eventually accepts this and fires Walt. He basically gives him a free out because Jesse refused to work for him if Walt dies of anything other than his cancer or other natural causes. Notice, he does not threaten him or his family until Walt gets sassy. This might be the most generous interpretation of this, but I kind of see this as lawful neutral. Taunting Hector that he murdered his business and his family is chaotic evil, though.
Stay with the boy. You will start a new batch when you are ready to return.
Later, though, Jesse suddenly refuses to cook. Gus genuinely has no idea why he suddenly refuses until Jesse reveals that Brock has been poisoned by someone. At first, Gus seemed sympathetic, but once he realized that Walt is out to kill him and got Jesse on his side, he arranges for Jesse's capture and enslavement. Neutral evil.
What kind of man talks to the DEA?
Later, he learns that Hector had a meeting with the DEA. The cartels have a code where they absolutely never speak to them. Infuriated by this, Gus visits Hector in his nursing home to eject him with a painful poison, unaware that Walt has already gotten to him and rigged an explosive. Gus's last moments are him realizing the mistake and walking out of the room. With what little dignity he could grasp, he ends his life in a Nat 20 scene. The 7 deadly sins are an annoying theme that lots of people have attributed to Breaking Bad's characters, but it's an effective one to quickly establish most of these characters' flaws. For Jesse, it's probably sloth. For Walter, it's definitely pride. But for Gus, his downfall is definitely the sin of wrath. All of these characters make mistakes throughout the series, and almost all of them are due to the sin that they are most guilty of. But Gus honestly would have easily won against Walter and the cartel due to his genius, but thanks to his inner rage and desire for revenge, he made several errors that cost him not only financially, but his own life. Thanks to Better Call Saul, we learn a lot more about Gus and his motivation. He genuinely wasn't that greedy. He was willing to take hefty financial losses in order to play the long con. He was also fairly compassionate and understanding to his subordinates when needed, and he really didn't have any desire to make himself seem better than anyone else. He's just a businessman who wanted to make money and coexist. However, he's also got this quiet and bubbling anger. He was willing to wait a long time to extract this revenge, but if you interrupt these plans, he would move and pounce immediately if you dared get between him and his rampage. When he took something personally, he refused to let it go, and he made sure you were going to suffer his consequences as long as possible. Which makes him a scary-ass villain, but also really personable and an understanding one. His rage probably started way back in Chile, but he didn't make his life's goal to destroy anyone there. But once the love of his life was killed, he was absolutely determined to destroy Hector in mind, body, and soul, attacking his well-being, his business, and his family. Personally, I can't say I probably wouldn't do the same thing. I get it. And I can imagine most people in the audience can kind of relate to that too. And this is why I love this series. Nearly every character eventually evolves into a monster, but it's a monster that's understandable and relatable. And that's what makes them so memorable and compelling. I love Gus Fring, and even though I disagree with the neutral evil assessment that was given by Mr. Esposito, it's not a call I would argue too hardly against. He is a prim and proper lawful evil that is driven totally by a chaotic evil need for revenge. Neutral evil ain't a bad spot. I just think a majority of his actions and goals stick him closer to lawful. But what do you guys think? Tell me about your thoughts in the comments below, and check back next week for the main character of Breaking Bad himself, Walter White. Thank you to the patrons, and I'll see you all next time.